Just think about the kind of men that you know or long to know. And it's not the information that they have that you want, it is their presence that you want.
Hey man, thank you for listening to my interview with Chris Bruno. This is one of my favorite episodes of Husband Material ever because it's all about finding the boy within you and bringing him home, or more accurately, finding all of the lost boys and bringing them home. And what do I mean by that? Well, it's based on the central premise of Husband Material that it's not men who get hooked on porn primarily, it's little boys. And if we want to outgrow porn, we have to heal that boy so that we can become more of the man that God has created us to be. And that's what Chris Bruno's new book, Sage, is all about. And in this interview, you will learn all about what it means to be a sage, how to locate the parts of yourself that got stuck when you were a little boy, and what healing really looks like. It's incredible. Here's a little quote from Chris's book. He says, "When the sage can tend to his own internal scared little boy, he has space to care for others as well." So this episode is not only going to help you heal even more, it's going to give you a guide for becoming more of a healing presence in the lives of others. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to Husband Material. Today on the show, I'm so excited to be with Chris Bruno, author of Man Maker Project and author of a new book called Sage, A Man's Guide into His Second Passage. Chris is the founder of Restoration Project and Restoration Counseling out in Fort Collins, Colorado. And it is a delight to be with you, Chris.
Drew, so good to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
You're welcome. For those who haven't listened to our first podcast episode about healing father wounds, which I will put a link to in the show notes, I would highly recommend going back and listening to that. Who is Chris Bruno?
Oh, you're wanting me to answer that question. Okay, great. I'm happy to answer the question who I am. Yeah. So I'm going to orient myself with my relationships. So, first of all, I am a father, I am a husband, I'm a son of God. And so I have been a husband for 27 years. I've been a father for 22. I've got a 22-year-old son, a 19-year-old daughter, and a 16-year-old daughter. And then I have been kind of walking with Jesus for the majority of my life, really starting when I was a teenager. And so the you mentioned the things that I do with regard to Restoration Project, which is a ministry focused on helping men recover their hearts, and restoration counseling, or sometimes we talk about restory counseling. And that is a local counseling center here in Fort Collins, but then we also have counselors all over the country. And I give leadership to both of those organizations. So that's what I do. But I am a lover of the outdoors. I'm a lover of Scotland and Ireland. And I am passionate about being in people's lives and stories. So great to be here with you today, Drew.
You too. And people's stories, specifically the stories of a hero or the story of a man, is something that you have written a lot about in this new book. Specifically, what happens as a man gets older? Does he just become elderly, or does he become an elder, or what you've called a sage? What is a sage?
Well, so a sage, Drew, is it's a kind of a lost art form, I think, in our world. A sage is, it can be a man or a woman, but for our context, I want to speak specifically to men. That a sage is a man who has done some significant internal work so that he doesn't just become an old, grumpy man. Like you just said, he doesn't just become elderly, but he becomes an elder. And there's a huge difference between those two. And I think if you think about the fictional stories that fill our worlds, that you mentioned the word hero, that, and I talk about this in the book, that behind every hero is another hero. And it doesn't mean that, every warrior has his wingman. That happens too. But behind every hero is a sage, a wiser, older, elder person who is offering them both presence and containment and care and guidance along the hero's journey. And so that is what a sage is. And I think kind of in the scriptures, we have sages all throughout the scriptures that don't get a lot of airtime because we're so focused on the actual hero of the story. But if you really look, there is a sage behind almost every one of, the kind of big name biblical guys. So that is what a sage is. A sage is someone who is attending to his own heart in a way that he is settled in himself. He has brought back some of the parts of him that have been kind of rattling around inside and reintegrated them into himself so that he can be settled and with other people pretty significantly.
Yeah. So Frodo has Gandalf.
Yes.
Harry Potter has Albus Dumbledore.
Luke has Yoda. I mean, it's just there's every almost every story has a sage.
And all of us have Chris Bruno.
Well, I don't know about that, but I hope to be that for people. And actually, Drew, when I was 16 years old, I encountered a sage that transformed my life, and ever since that moment, it has been kind of the focus of my journey as a man to become a sage. So as a 16-year-old, and here, in a couple of months, I turned 50. So I'm still on the front end of this second half of life journey. And I'm not 60, I'm not 70, I'm not 80, but I really want to be intentional about how I move into that next season of my life, and I feel like I'm getting closer, far
Yeah.
closer than I was when I was 16, for sure.
And I absolutely love the way that you have described what it means to be a sage. And for everyone who's a little bit younger, like me, closer to your 20s than your 40s,
Yeah,
this also applies. Younger men are asking these questions more and more. What does it mean for me to have meaning, for
yeah.
me to be a man, for me to grow older and wiser and not just achieve or accomplish stuff. So this really applies to all of us.
I'm so glad you said that, Drew, because it's really true. And like I just said, as a 16-year-old, I had my sights set on being a sage. And I feel like the younger that we can begin to imagine the man that God made us to be and how we can journey towards that man, I feel like the more we will actually live in that space. And I'm not saying that as a 25-year-old or 35-year-old, you need to like arrive. There is no arrival at Sage. It is a constant journey, even, all the way until the very end. But I love it when guys are like, hey, I'm in my 20s. I want to be thinking about what does it look like for me to be 30, 40, 50, 60 years old so that I have kind of a roadmap of where I'm heading, to be intentional about how I spend my day and my year, not just looking back on like, how should I have spent my day or my year? Like, how will I intend to spend the next, 1 to 5, 10 years of my life?
Yeah. And this book, Sage, is such a great roadmap. It tells you about the 6 different stages of manhood. It gives you some guidance for writing a full life review. But really, the whole core of it is finding the boy within the man. You have
Mm-hmm.
this core claim that in order to become a sage, we must find the boy within each of us and bring him home.
Yeah, the so you mentioned the other book I wrote, Man Maker Project, which is all about an intentional rites of passage process for a boy to become a man. And we've talked about that before, Drew. There's so little in our society about that actually mapped out process, that rite of passage process. I did not have that. I don't know many guys, that did. And so what I want is to spark a movement of men, of fathers who will do this, walk their sons through that journey, which that's what Man Maker Project is about. And the way I talk about it is like the first task, the first of the first passage of a man's life. The task is to find the man within the boy and call him forth. That's that first rite of passage when the boy is transitioning into man. But the second passage, the task of the second passage is just as you said, to find the boy within the man and bring him home, meaning that all throughout our lives, we have these broken off, splintered off, um, exiled parts of ourselves that we lose, that either we intentionally send away, we intentionally ignore, kind of bury in the backyard, or close away into the skeleton closet, whatever it is, where we don't want to. There are parts of us that we either don't like, or that we are disgusted by, or that are they don't, for whatever reason, they're not working, or they don't feel like they're going to work for us in this life, and so we put them away. And I feel like for us, and to actually become the fullness of who God made us to be, we have to go find those parts again and bring them back and reintegrate them back. And it's almost like, a puzzle, 1,000-piece puzzle that gets put together by God, and then it kind of gets shattered by all the life traumas and things that we experience. And it's bringing all those puzzle pieces back so we can see the whole beautiful masterpiece of who God made us to be. That's what I mean by bringing the boy home.
Yeah, it's so cool. And yet, if you've never experienced it, it might seem like psychological jargon or like, what is he talking about? Is it really true that living inside each man is a boy who knows pain, sorrow, suffering, and grief?
Yes, absolutely. What we know from neuroscience, okay, is that memory is held within our bodies as stories, as narratives, and not like we think it is in kind of this encoded facts and dates and times and things like that, right? So that memories are held within us as stories. And so the story of when I was 5 is not just the date and the time or the location, but it is how I experienced myself and the world when I was 5 or 10 or 12 or 15 or 25. All of those stories still live within me. And so it's those parts of me that I'm talking about, right? It's those parts of us that when I experienced that trauma, that little part of me, that memory, which still feels young when it gets activated, and he kind of pops out like those Russian nesting dolls. Like I talk about that a lot, right? There's those dolls that there's a big one and then another one and another one, and they're all kind of inside of one another. Well, every once in a while, something happens in the world that a younger part of me pops out. And it might be like, hey, I'm about to get on stage and give a presentation for work, or I'm about to have a hard conversation with my wife, or I'm about to do something different. Like there's a young part of me that gets activated, he pops out, and now all of a sudden I am no longer acting as the almost 50-year-old man. Now I am a 12-year-old boy who's afraid to run out into the field, and join the football team, kind of thing. So those are the parts of me that I'm talking about.
Now it feels a lot more relatable because we all have these parts of us coming up, whether we know it or not.
Yeah.
Our usual instinct is to try to control those parts of us, or don't let anyone else see those parts of us, or just not think
Yeah.
about them. Why does a man need to bless his younger self?
So that all of the pieces of who God originally thought him up to be can be reintegrated and brought back to the wholeness and the fullness of that masterpiece that he originally made. Because that's where I, Chris, actually get to be the most Chris. And you get to be the most Drew, is when those parts of you are brought back and reintegrated. And that's a journey, and I'm happy to talk more about what that looks like. But it's where those younger parts are tended to, where what I experienced as a 5-year-old or as a 7-year-old or as a 10-year-old uh, actually gets care and kindness and gentleness. It's where the trauma that I experienced no longer is the loudest narrative. It's actually where kindness and care and tending becomes the greater narrative, so that those parts of us can settle, be safe, be tended to, as I said, and kind of be welcome back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that seems like a radical idea that these parts of me that I don't like, these parts of me that I have treated with contempt, are part of God's masterpiece,
Mm-hmm.
are part of who I am that would actually make me more of myself.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Maybe let me give an example, okay, of something that's just happened in my life recently. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So a little background. I was never, not once, on a sports team. My dad never threw the football with me, never threw the baseball with me. I never learned how to swing a bat. There was nothing with regard to kind of team sports or any of that stuff because of where we lived. We were pretty rural. Like I couldn't get myself to the school without someone driving me, and there wasn't anybody available to make that happen for me and my family of origin. And so I was just never athletic. I was just never sporty, and as a result, I had lack of coordination. I had lack of kind of muscle building as a boy. I never went and worked out. I never learned how to sweat. I never did any of that kind of stuff. And I never had a coach speak to me or into my life or like give me a high five ever. So there's a little boy inside of me that never had any of that. And now all of a sudden, here I am almost 50 and I'm starting to do some of those things. And I recognize some of the loss and some of the grief and some of the sadness and even some of the body shame that I've been living with for all these years just because I didn't have that part of me. So as I'm now like watching what I'm eating and working out and doing more, it's not just about the lifting of the weights or watching the diet. It's about being with that athletic boy who never had someone to be with him before and high-fiving. I know it sounds bizarre, right? But like high-fiving myself for achieving the next goal and kind of fathering my own younger boy in places where he never experienced that fathering before and welcoming him home into myself rather than continuing to stay disgusted by how uncoordinated or unsporty he is or however much pudge he had growing up, like all that kind of stuff. Like rather than being disgusted by him or exiling him, as I said, it's like, I'm going to welcome you home
Mm-hmm.
and come back to myself.
How do you practically do that?
I think a couple things. So, first, you have to recognize that he's there. You have to be aware that there are, 1,000 shards of our own identity that have been broken off and split by the traumas that we've experienced. And um, you asked a question before, like, do we all have these? And a second part to that answer is yes, we do, because all of us live in a broken and breaking world, right? A broken and breaking world that none of us can kind of skate through life unscathed. And so there's all of us have these kinds of parts inside of us. So first is to recognize that we do. And then second is to approach those with and a big word that I love and I think a lot of us love is the word curiosity. To
Mm-hmm.
approach those with a level of curiosity rather than contempt, rather than judgment, rather than disgust, rather than distancing, right? So with my athletic boy, right, I had been pretty harsh on him. Like didn't like him. I just don't like sports because that younger Chris, you couldn't figure it out. You weren't sporty because you're clumsy and you're fat. That's why you weren't sporty. And instead of coming at it from that contempt or that judgment or that disgust, approach it like, huh, what what was going on here? Maybe what was that boy experiencing as he was growing up? Who did tend to him and who didn't tend to him?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there's some opportunity that I now have to tend to him in a way that he's never known before. And so that's that being aware and then being curious, and then coming at it from an approach of kindness instead of contempt or judgment.
I love that so much. The word curiosity means being a learner
Mm-hmm.
rather than being a teacher. Sometimes I find the impulse within myself or other men to teach that younger part of me and say, um, you should believe that you're good or something like that. Rather than being a learner and saying, tell me more about that.
Mm-hmm.
Learning this boy's story, learning what I survived, learning how it made me feel, and really sitting with
Yes.
rather than trying to change or improve myself right away.
Yeah. No transformation ever resulted from someone attempting to convince you of anything.
Mm,
Convincing doesn't change people. Even if I try to convince myself,
yeah.
it doesn't transform people. Witness is what transforms us. Witness is at the core of the gospel. Witness is all about, like, if there is something that is broken in the Garden of Eden, it was the witness between humans and God. That connection, that witness was broken. And then we see at the end of the scriptures, we see witness reestablished, that we are with God and he is with us, and he comes, the witness is so great that he dwells with us once again. And then we have the middle ground of what Jesus is all about, is this coming back into relationship, to the degree that even one of the names of Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us. So that, if we can be with those parts of us rather than, as I've said, kind of disgusted or disdaining towards them, it's transformation.
It's so true. It's so true. And that's what a sage does, right?
Yeah,
A sage is someone who has learned to be with myself so that I can have this spacious hospitality and contentedness to just be with another man.
with others. Just think about the kind of men that you know or long to know. And it's not the information that they have that you want, it is their presence that you want. It is that, for going back to some of those sages, right? Luke doesn't want information from Yoda, but he's invited, or maybe he thinks he wants information from Yoda. Tell me about the Force. But actually, what does Yoda do is he makes him stew, and they sit down around a fire and they talk. And it's about that hospitality of welcoming in. That's ultimately what we want from sages. And we can't be that sage unless we have done some of this work to be at home with ourselves so that we can create a home for others.
This is so good. This is what we all need. This is what I deeply desire for myself and for our world. You went through a couple of steps. You said we need to recognize the boy within, we need to be curious. And what's the next step?
Yeah. So awareness, curiosity, and kindness are kind of my three things. So be aware of him. Where does he show up? Be curious about where he is and when he shows up, and how he shows up. And then be kind. That, ultimately it is kindness that brings transformation. So that kindness is with that athletic boy, right? And it is, hey, like, you can do this. I see you. I don't have to hate you anymore. I don't have to run away from you anymore, but I can be with you and give you a high five when when you make your next goal.
I love how you even call him the athletic boy.
Yeah.
Even just that name demonstrates kindness.
Yes. Oh, there's so many boys. There's right. There's the commanding boy. There's the athletic boy. There's the sexual boy. There's um the comforting boy. There's the good boy, right? There's the powerful boy.
Within each of us, there's not a single inner child. It's like there's a posse. There's the Lost Boys, like Peter Pan.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you just brought that up. There's the lost boys. That's what I would call them. All the boys that we have lost along the way. that are all, another way of saying that is all of the boys, all of the parts of us who had to survive something, all the surviving boys.
Mm.
And there's different somethings that different parts of us had to survive. Parts of us had to survive our father. Parts of us had to survive our mother. Parts of us had to survive abuse. Parts of us had to survive loss and grief and trauma and tragedy in various forms and ways. There's an academic boy in me, and I found academics as a way to survive my family of origin.
Yeah. And in order to survive, you have some really helpful terms to describe what we do to survive. The terms are projections
Yeah.
and personas. Can
Okay.
you say more about those?
Yes. So yeah, I explored these a lot in the book. Um, they're not original terms to me. I think some of the way that I talk about them might be a little different, but think about this, Drew. So when a piece of metal is then embossed or engraved by some marking process, it transforms from a piece of metal into a coin. Okay. And most of the time, that coin, that embossing process, has three things that are embossed onto it: a value, a home, like where it's from, what country it's from, and then usually some kind of face. All right. So, because we live in a broken world, that embossing process, that image bearing process, which in the Greek is connected to the characterizing process of who God made us to be, when He characterized us, externally, He gave us a value from Him, a home from Him, and a face from Him. Okay, that we then carry within our being this image of God, right? The who we are. Well, because we live in a broken and fallen world, we've lost touch with those three things. Who am I? Where do I belong? Where is my value? Right? All of those things. Now we've lost touch with those questions. And so the projections and the personas are exporting from myself onto the world those questions. Someone, please tell me, who am I? Where is my value? Where do I belong? And so I project those internal questions into my external world, asking the worlds, the jobs, the bank accounts, the cars, the wives, the people, the coaches, whatever it is, I'm exporting those internal questions into my external world. That is what is a projection. And we all do it. Okay. We all have these projections. And we look around for someone else's face to tell me who I am. That's a projection. And that's part of my survival. So someone is willing to tell me who I am. The coach is willing to tell me, I'm a great quarterback. In my case, that wasn't the case. In my case, it was a teacher who was willing to tell me that I had some level of academic ability. And so that feedback was like, oh, okay, I guess you're willing to tell me who that is, or my mother, my father was willing to tell me, hey, you can bring some great comfort. Now, of course, they didn't ever say that directly, but that's the message that I absorbed in my family of origin. So I was like, okay, I will be that person. So I project my questions out onto the world, and then the personas is who then I become, what mask I put on myself so that I can, okay, there's some reinforcement here. This feels good. So I'm going to become that person. I'm going to take on that role to be that person now throughout the rest of my life. And it is how we survive. And the questions that I want guys to ask is, how much of those are actually true to your original design, and how much of those are because of splintered off questions that actually are answered more on the inside of who you are rather than on the outside.
Yeah, so we can project our questions and our insecurities onto people. And it sounds like we can also project them into pornography.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, we can project it onto anything. And I think especially for, husband material uh, guys, it is a very, very easy place. Pornography is a very easy place to make those projections because first of all, the projections happen when we're, little boys. Projections happen onto our parents. And when there isn't the kind of response or feedback that we need, we find somewhere else that will provide us with a sufficient answer or response. And pornography is all too happy to provide those answers.
Mm-hmm.
All too happy to provide those answers. And here's where I want to land for a second here, Drew, is that it is not the boy's, I'm going to say fault. It's not the boy's brokenness. It's not the boy's even kind of awareness because he is so naive most of the time. I'm going to say most of the time, he is so naive as to even what answers are being asked or answered by those initial stages of pornography that it just feels good. Someone
Mm-hmm.
is responding. There is some answer that is coming back my way in I will give you attention, I will give you delight, I will give you arousal, I will give you a sense of relief, I will give you a sense of both celebration and grief. Like all of those things are the questions that pornography is willing to answer. And so it's really important, I think, for husband material guys to attend to the boy who first began to kind of play in the sandbox of pornography.
Yes. And to find that boy
Yes.
and bless him. I love how you write, the more time I spend listening to and blessing this boy, the more I welcome him back into myself and remember the innocent desires and the glorious masterpiece he brought to this world, the more he comes home.
Yes.
So could it be that we turn to porn because there was something right with us?
What a brilliant question. What a brilliant question. And I think absolutely. I think those desires for connection, back to where I was saying, what I was saying before, the desire for witness is not a fault.
Mm-hmm.
The desire for witness is part of the human condition. And when witness is not being offered, witness will be found, even if it is fake, pseudo, or insufficient. And so, where a boy is looking for witness, and maybe he stumbles across it, or maybe he goes in search of it, the witness that pornography offers is actually the kind of prey on the innocence of the boy's God-given desires.
Yeah. Yeah, porn is a predator.
Yes.
And it exploited us when we were very young.
Yes.
So now we are here to rescue that boy or all of those lost boys.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something really comforting about that. And also, there's something challenging about that because, as you've written, no one else can do this for me. That really stood out to me, that even if I'm looking to a wonderful man to attune to my heart, or even if I'm looking for that very best friend, or even if I'm looking to God for help to rescue me, there's a part of this that only I can do.
Mm-hmm. Because otherwise it's just another projection. Otherwise, I am putting someone else in the role of God Himself to save me from those parts that need healing. And the way that I like to talk about it and think about it, Drew, is this: back to Mark chapter 10, where Jesus is saying, hey, let the little children come to me. It's actually, I need to be the one to go and get those little boys inside of me and bring them to the foot of the cross. You can't do that for me, Drew. You can guide me, You can help me, you can counsel me, you can give me, thought-provoking questions, and you can be with me in the journey, but no one else can actually do the work for me on my internal space other than me. I have to do that work. So I think what we spend our lives doing is we're waiting for someone else to do it for us. And both the good news and the bad news is no one else is coming. No one else can do it. We each have to do it ourselves. The good news is we can each do this work.
Oh, it's so real.
Yeah.
No one else can do it for us. And yet our projections and our personas are ways that we have learned to survive rather than doing this really deep, essential internal work so that we can become the men that
Mhm.
God has written us to be. And you have created a really cool free online assessment on how to identify some of these areas where we've been offloading or exporting the work onto our jobs or onto other people. Um,
Mhm.
can you say more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in the book is a QR code that will lead you to this assessment because we wanted to help guys go, okay, like even where are some of these projections and personas in my life? And we've kind of narrowed it down to there's 1,000 possibilities of it. So there's no way to do a full assessment of every single possibility, but some general categories of where a good majority of us have at least some of these projections and personas. And I've already mentioned a couple of them. They're your career, they're your relationships. If you are married, they're your spouse. If it is maybe your family of origin, it could be if you have children, it's onto your children. So just categories of places that we just wanted to surface, like, okay, here are some ways that maybe some of these projections and personas might show up, and then here are some ways to maybe begin addressing some of those. So that is an assessment that is a part of the book, and it's been fun to see how guys are interacting with that, being
Yeah.
like, okay, this actually gives me some tangible, you know, lanes for me to pursue, some tangible parts of myself to pursue. And with some of that curiosity, it's like, okay, so what's going on there?
Giving us a little marker to say, you are here. Now, where's this coming from? How did I get here? At the end of the book, Sage, there are a couple of really powerful stories about what it really looks like for men to be doing this work. There was one that really stood out to me about Curtis.
Mm-hmm.
Curtis's story felt really powerful to me. Could you share it?
Sure. Yeah. So there are several stories throughout the book. And so I'm just going to say this, that all the stories in the book are a conglomeration of many people and fictionalized to protect their confidentiality and their privacy. The story that is Curtis's story at the end of the book is one where I was with him at a men's retreat. He was in his 50s, and we had begun talking about some of the journey into the second half. And he'd done some significant work before this conversation that I had with him, but there was a part of him that he had never revealed to anyone. Now he is kind of a leader in the church, and he's kind of speaks at men's things and all that kind of stuff. But he had this internal secret that he had kept for a long, long time. And he just knew that he had to address it before he could really continue to move into bringing all those parts of him home, all those little boys of him home. He had identified and knew of another little boy that was still exiled and out there. And this was a little boy. He told me, he's like, just blurted out in the middle of the time that we were together. He's like, I've been masturbating since I was 11, and I have done so since then every day, at least once a day, if not more than that, since then for the last 42 years or whatever it was. That is what's been going on, and I just can't shake it. I've tried to stop. I can't stop. And no matter what I do, I just can't stop masturbating. And so my response was, Curtis, gosh, thank you for telling me, first of all. And I want you to notice that I haven't gone anywhere. Okay. I haven't gone anywhere. And in his eyes were both terrified and grateful at the same time. And so we began to explore, Drew, some of the story, like I said, with that curiosity, began to explore some of the story, not like, what have you tried to stop? That's not where we went. I asked him the question, I said, where did it begin? Where did it begin? And so he began to unpack some of the narrative that surrounded his family of origin and, some of the distance that he felt from his mother and his father and how they had not tended to his little boy heart and his siblings and how they were, also not tending to his existence really. And even there was some disdain from them and towards them. And so here we've got, and then there was Curtis. And so here we've got these four people that live in his home, and there's no emotional food that's being offered him. There was nothing that was kind of coming his way. And so, in back to what you were saying before on the projection onto pornography, what he found was not pornography. What he found and accidentally discovered one night as he was rubbing on the sheets of his bed was he found masturbation and ejaculation and how good it felt and how masculine it felt. And so all of these belittling spaces in his life kind of took a side, stance. And he found that, hey, when this thing happens in my body is when I feel power, I feel in control, I feel connected, I feel relief, I feel good, and all that. And so that first night that he discovered it was like, whoa, what was that? And then several nights after that, he went back to it and did it again and did it again and did it again. And so this was the only place that he knew that he could feel the most masculine kind of space that he had ever known. And it just continued on after that until one day, he told me that he was in the bathroom and he was alone and he was masturbating for the seventh or eighth time that day. And he had rubbed his penis raw and he couldn't masturbate anymore. And there was kind of like this breaking point for him, this awareness for him that this was, he was asking his penis to answer a question it was never designed to answer. Based on the narrative, we discovered that he was asking his penis to confirm his manhood. And every time he masturbated, he was asking it to say, hey, you are a man. You have what it takes. You are powerful. You are strong. You can be rigid. You can be, you can have all of this stuff that happens in those moments. He was asking his penis to answer those questions. And so as we began to kind of parse that out, and I said to him, it doesn't sound like your penis was ever designed to answer those questions, was it? He was able to say, no, no, it wasn't. I said, who can answer those questions for you? He's like, I don't know. I don't know. I said, I know someone who can. And he said, the classic Christian response, well, Jesus? I said, yes. And before Jesus, there is yet another man, and he's sitting right in front of me. So, what would it be like for you to answer the question for that little 11-year-old boy who was so like lacking in the space of that confirmation of his manhood and found masturbation and his penis in that moment? Can you speak to that part of you, that younger boy, and say, hey, you are a man? I know as an adult man, I know who you are, younger man inside of me, younger boy inside of me. I know who you are, and I confirm your manhood for you. And he began to speak of those things to that part of him and welcome that part of him home because he'd been disgusted and desirous, right? Both disgusted. I can't believe I'm this masturbatory, like have this addiction, and I desire it so much. He began to reintegrate both of those parts into himself and go like, I don't need to ask you, penis, anymore to answer those questions. I can bring you home because those questions are now answered by myself. And then back to Mark 10, he was able to bring that little boy to the foot of the cross. and ask for the healing of Jesus to bless him and to welcome him home, and not be disgusted by the desire for connection, the desire for manhood, the desire for something powerful and sexual. No, it wasn't that. Jesus was able to bless that little boy who was acting out of the God-given desire for witness in the beginning. And so that is the story of Curtis. Obviously, there is so much more that I could say around all that. But I think it's important just to notice, like, those projections cannot answer those questions.
Mm-hmm.
You can.
Chris, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been fun to be here with you.
Yeah, it is fun. It's powerful, and it's giving all of us a little more imagination for what it might look like for each of us to find the boy within the man and bring him home.
Yeah.
Chris, what is your favorite thing about healing?
My favorite thing about healing, I'm gonna take your question and change it.
Okay.
My two favorite things about healing is that, first of all, healing requires hope. And I believe that hope is actually defiance. So if we're going to be in the realm of healing, then there is a realm of defiance against the tyranny of the stories that have attempted to capture us all of our lives. And being on a healing journey is saying no, right? It's that defiance. So there is a hope there. And then secondly, it is it is a movement of awe, where all healing is impossible unless there is a movement of someone who is greater than us to bring healing. We cannot heal ourselves. We can do the part. No one is coming for you. We can do the part to bring our broken parts to Jesus, but it requires a level of awe that once I experience healing, I have to also know that there was someone who has been waiting for me all along. So hope and awe. That's what I love.
Hope and awe.
And to see those two things dance in the eyes of someone is nothing but miraculous. So that's what I love.
Even just by listening to this podcast episode or watching this video, my friend, I see your hope. You are choosing to say no to despair and passivity and compliance with the enemy. You are choosing to hope for yourself, for those you love. Thank you so much for listening. So as we continue our healing journeys together, I invite you to respond to this episode in the husband material community, where we are going to be sharing how it has impacted each of us, and also doing a giveaway of Chris's book, Sage. So if you would like to enter that giveaway, please join the husband material community, and let's keep the conversation going. Chris, thank you so much for all your work.
Thank you, Drew, and thank you for the work that you're doing too.
You're welcome. And more importantly, for who you are, for your eyes, for your heart, for your witness.
Thank you. Good to be with you today.
Likewise. And gentlemen, always remember, you are God's beloved son. In you, he is well pleased.